Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where seasoned leaders and top-tier executives in science, tech, pharma, finance, and innovation open up and get real with me and with you. You'll hear personal stories from key moments of their career arcs and how they've struggled and succeeded when it comes to moving audiences from the red light of risk to the green light of go. I'm Cindy Skalicky, storytelling strategist and author of the best-selling book, Red Light, Green Light, How Top Leaders Present with Polish, Get Buy-in, and Become More Influential. On this podcast, you'll hear from an exceptional invite-only lineup of leaders who've been in the room and at the table when stakes were high, decisions were hard, and their stories had to land. This is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips you can try immediately to drive the vision of innovation with your team. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of Red Light, Green Light. I am your host, Cindy Skalicky, and every week we bring to you a new leader who is in the lanes of science, technology, and innovation, and we crack open their stories so you can hear some of their former successes, some of the former bumps along the road that they may have had when it comes to communications and their storytelling. And we're just here to have a good time and a great conversation. I am excited today to bring to you a guest, Michael Campbell. Michael and I actually go way back to high school years back in Illinois, right, Michael?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Crazy.
And I know it's completely crazy how we reconnected, but I'm going to go ahead, Michael, and read a couple of lines of the intro that I prepared for you. So hopefully I'm getting this right. Everybody, you're going to enjoy today's conversation so much. Michael Campbell is Vice President of Global Security at Velasi, where he leads strategic relationships with top global enterprise and integrated partners. Michael has spent almost 3 decades in the security and infrastructure space, and he's known for opening doors, navigating complex organizations, and building relationships. In fact, one of the lines I remember from our coffee, I got to hang out with Michael while I was in Chicago a couple weeks ago. He said, I actually like people. And as silly as that might sound, we're going to dive into that a little bit later. So welcome to the show, Michael. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
absolutely. Let's kick off by talking a little bit about how you realized you actually like people. Maybe we'll start there and then we'll get a little bit into your background.
Sounds good. Well, I'd like to say that, like any good marriage, I give my wife credit for pointing out some things that I'm really good at and some areas where I need some work.
Yeah.
This happened to be one area that my wife and I actually talk a lot about,
Wow.
is that, one thing for me when I'm in a social setting, I tend to get more energized.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a conversation with my boss a few weeks ago when we were at a conference, and he said, "I know you're going to go down to the bar and talk to a lot of people, and I'm going to go upstairs and not talk to people anymore."
Right.
And so, I think it just shows up in many ways that I really enjoy having conversations,
Yeah.
oftentimes in a relaxed setting, especially with business,
Mm-hmm.
and in a consultative way. It's just nice to
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just hang out with people and get to know them on a personal level without there being a looming business
Yeah.
reason to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
so whether it's in a personal or a professional setting, I find that I'm kind of in that state. It
Yeah.
doesn't always show up that way, but sometimes I get
Yeah.
irritated with folks, just like everybody. But it does show up pretty much all the time for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I'm curious about who you are and what lights you up and what kind of background you as a person bring. And when you have that curiosity about people, it makes you a great fit for the work that you do. So why don't we talk a little about that, Michael? What
Sounds good.
are some of your, 2 or 3 main stepping stones, if you will, around your career arc that's gotten you to
Velasi, where you are now?
Perfect. I'd have to probably start first and foremost with going from sales to management.
Okay.
Uh, there was a leader, a general manager, and a regional vice president who trusted in me, way back in the day
Mhm.
uh, to lead a team
Mhm.
that I was on, which was incredibly challenging. When I think
Sure.
back to having to go from being on the team and challenging my leadership to being that leader and having
Mhm.
to uh, you know hold people accountable for things that I probably myself had done maybe not so perfectly.
Right, right.
So
Tables
yeah,
have
so
turned.
you're right. I think when you're young in your management career, you think you have to aim for this level of perfection. And,
Mm.
I think what you recognize very quickly is people already know your flaws. And so to avoid
Oh,
them,
yeah.
um, you know, I think that gets in the way. And so just
Mhm.
being there for folks, as I started to further on in that role and getting much
Mhm.
more comfortable and of course, hitting results, right? Which
Yep.
is the first and foremost reason why you're in that role is to achieve results and growth and
Mhm.
profitability.
Yeah.
And so,
Deliver.
over that time period, I was able to do those things and then get to the next level and create
Mhm.
relationships. And so, I think I would hearken back to that,
Mhm.
Cindy, and then also that leadership team that I was on, that
Mhm.
regional vice president that I was entrusted to kind of take over a pretty significant team for.
Mhm.
I ended up working for in multiple organizations
Oh,
over
nice.
15 years. So,
Okay. Fantastic.
um, so that was kind of a key turning point. I worked
Yeah.
for the same leader and same leadership team for over 15 years, and so that was
Yeah. That's a
really
unique
a pivotal.
situation. Yeah.
It
Mhm.
really was.
Mhm.
And so I think, the growth between going from a manager to a director and then a director to a VP
Mhm.
and running teams, but ultimately kind of, the lens changes a little bit, that the
Mhm.
responsibility you have changes,
Right.
but but I would say the goals are the same, which is growth. It's personal development of the people that you're working with.
Right.
So I don't think those were any different. And so, I think every role I got into, I got a little uncomfortable, which
Mhm.
I think is really important.
Right.
And when I got too comfortable, that's when I knew I was,
Yeah.
maybe not in the right spot,
Ready to
if that
keep
makes sense.
going. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about what you might see if you look backwards right now at that
Yeah.
time frame, from the communications lens. We do a lot of work with people going from, well, I call it like lab to lead. So, not
Mm.
maybe a real lab, but like the technical parts of the job. In your case, the selling, right? And then going into leading, it's a big change. So communication has to change. It's a big mindset game. What do you see when you look back as some of the, green light methods you found to be tried and true that worked well to take on that leadership role and be the kind of leader that you want it to be?
That's a great question, Cindy. I think it goes back to just making sure you're being fair. I
Mm,
think the biggest thing that for me, I saw pretty consistently was maybe sometimes it was unfair. And, frankly,
that's fair.
leadership change and organizations are often unfair, right? There's a lot of
Right.
things that happen.
Yeah.
But I tried to be fair with my team.
Hmm.
I tried to diversify my hiring
Hmm.
um, so that my sales team looked like my local community. And so
Okay.
I had a very diverse
Yeah.
team.
Hmm.
And so, in some cases, giving people chances that maybe other leaders wouldn't. I
Hmm.
think that was really, really
Yeah.
helpful.
Hmm.
I also think I I didn't run with every corporate program that maybe was trying to be, that
Okay.
every new leader's pet project was coming down the pike.
Right.
Uh, just learning and getting the confidence to know how to roll things out and maybe support things in a way that is both beneficial to your team, but yet at the same time you're following the corporate line as much as you can and have
Yep.
to,
Hmm.
without disrespecting the leaders that have put
Right.
together so much effort and energy into these programs, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah,
uh,
that's a good point. It's a balancing act for sure when it comes to how you wanna lead you have to do that, freedom within the framework, right? You have a framework of, things you need to follow, and then you want to, and I'm sure that upstream they want the leadership to feel like they have freedom to do their own style within their framework that they spent all this time and money to build. So that's a great point. What about, Michael, a person maybe in your life that who you look back on and say, yeah, that person really impacted me, or maybe even got me interested in sales? Like, who was who was in your past who, directed you one way or another and helped you?
Yeah. So a guy named Chris Schwagel
Okay.
was one of my key mentors. He was probably my first mentor. He was married to my sister.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
so while that didn't work out, um, he has and still remains a part of my life. He
Okay.
lives in Colorado,
Oh, great.
and he is since he and I still continue to
Hmm.
stay in touch.
Great.
But he was instrumental, being in high school and seeing Chris succeed in
Mm.
sales and have a level of independence. And he also was part of the reason I joined the security industry.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Was
and
that what he
so
was in? And he was must have been older than you by a bit.
Correct. Yeah,
Hmm.
by about
Okay.
9 years.
Okay.
But always saw him as a mentor.
Hmm.
He really just showed the right way of doing things. Had a lot of integrity, still does, of
Hmm.
course, right? But
Right.
at the time when I'm going back to how I made decisions,
Hmm.
I modeled a lot by what I saw Chris doing and modeling.
Yeah.
He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the
Mm.
salesy type of
Right.
account executive. He was
Right.
more of personable, but
Yeah.
yet caring for his customers. And
Mhm.
so he has been an incredible example to me on how to
Mm.
do things the right way.
Mm. Uh-huh.
And I always like to kind of think that I followed his
Yeah.
footsteps more than mine.
I love
So
that. I love
yeah,
that. And it's around putting your clients and customers first and being really around serving them, right? And service to them. Like, how can I be of help to you? How can I, instead of how can I ring the register, it's how can
right,
I help you and your team and your company and your, where can I come in and be of service? And so that's just a great mindset for all of us to have. I mean, we're all selling all the time something,
right,
right? It's just a matter of mindset that can make such a big difference. And it is felt by others. It's definitely easy to feel that salesy flashiness right out of the gate, or
sure,
that good listener who likes people and is just curious about what you do and what interests you, and how you see the problem perhaps versus what I think the problem is and how I'm going to solve it for you. So, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think I got out of that whole era
Mhm.
was realizing when I was being transactional, um,
Yes.
I was losing all the time. And when
Mhm.
I was being, outcome focused and focused on the customer's goals and focused
Yes.
on aligning to what they needed,
Mhm.
uh, you know, it, the conclusion ended up being a natural path to, you still have to
Mhm.
close, of course, but
Sure.
getting to that conclusion was so much easier when you're aligned
Yeah.
to their goals and you can show them how to get there.
Yep.
Uh, Versus just being transactional about me. Then it's about you and it's about your company and your goals. And
Mhm.
you know I think anytime I focus there, and we all have, right, I think over the
Sure.
years,
Sure.
um, when I focus on me personally, I was losing, and when I
Yep.
was focused on them, I was winning every time.
That
So
is a great succinct way to put it. Yes.
yeah,
So,
so
Michael, let's turn a little bit toward kind of, you've been in hundreds of sales presentations. You've given
Mhm.
probably hundreds or thousands of them yourself in your history. And I know that you have seen and read all or most of the book that I wrote and gave
yes,
to you and a couple of others, Red Light, Green Light, which is the name of our podcast. So I just want to chat about sales messaging because you're
perfect,
so steeped in it, and because you've learned pretty much every methodology that's out there. And I come from a standpoint where I don't negate other sales methods that are out there. There's definitely value in all of them. And while the how-to model is not purely about the sales conversation, it works for them very well also. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit, just before we go into the lights system, kind of what are some themes that you've noticed about the sales conversation that just never change? Like, what are some ingredients of it? Or, I mean, you've got to have a really dialed in um, mind around the order and flow of a sales conversation.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is starting with something that's of value to them instead
Hmm.
of you to you.
Right, right.
I think when I was younger in my sales career, I was taught to sell on the company's, value proposition and our key differentiation and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
All the things that early in the sales process don't matter to the prospect or customer.
Right.
And so, changing that up, one thing that, I've coached salespeople to do, I try to do every time when I'm on a sales call is lead with an example that they can
Yes.
relate to. That's a story,
Yep.
either a short version success example
Hmm.
or something that's relatable to them that they're
Hmm.
trying to do that maybe inciting fear, frustration, upset, anger,
Yep.
etc.
Yep. The
Any of
feeling.
the
Hmm.
emotional feeling
Yes.
words, right? To get
Hmm.
them thinking about what's maybe dissatisfactory to current state,
Hmm. Hmm.
usually motivates a strong conversation to say, okay, if you had to redesign this, what would life look like if this problem was gone, and etc.
Yep. Yep.
And so less about the problem and more about the impact to solving it,
Right.
and getting them to kind of sit in that has always
Yes.
been beneficial instead of
Hmm.
selling off a presentation or a catalog or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Yeah,
Well, and feeling the pain badly enough that you're
right.
motivated to explore that visionary moment of like, well, what if we could get rid of this problem and this pain? And what does good look like if we can make any edits to this process, product, system, whatever it might be. So that's awesome. Have you had
Yeah.
any experiences that come to mind where you just fell on your face early on and just completely
Definitely. How many? I mean, how many do you want? I mean, I got tons, tons of examples.
Well, let's think about those fail moments because it's I appreciate you being willing to talk about it. But yeah,
Absolutely.
what were you doing wrong that you now look back on in a, if you can drill down into some of the behaviors or mechanisms, or didn't rehearse enough, didn't overwhelm the slides, just ran over everybody's words, talked too fast. Like what are some of the things that come to mind when you feel like, man, I really fell on my face?
Yeah, I'm thinking of that one, right? That one where you got feedback and it hurt.
Yes,
So
yes.
I was working with a property manager trying to sell a brand new system for a multi-tenant, very large building in the city of Chicago.
Okay.
And here I am thinking I got it all figured out. So
Of course.
first and foremost, was I went in solo. I didn't get help.
Oh, okay.
And so
Great feedback.
one of my mentors used to say, "No one has the authority to lose alone." And
Mm,
so I always liked that phrase,
hmm.
never lose alone.
Yeah.
And so that was the first problem. The second
Oh,
was
that's
I
great.
I made a lot of assumptions about what this
Oh,
this woman in the property needed without
amen.
asking a lot of relevant questions.
Yes.
I also didn't challenge the buyer to get into that discovery in a way that would be meaningful to come to a true solution development.
Mhm.
It was a lot of assumptions, and
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
um, that led me to, really, unfortunately, I had to cut corners when I was developing the ultimate strategy for what we're going to put together.
Mhm.
And I found it, I just found it just woefully unprepared. I was
Oh.
also winging it a bit on the sales call in the first
Mhm.
meeting, and
Mhm.
so part of the reason this is so acute for me is because I asked for feedback and I
Okay.
got and I got it.
Ooh,
Uh,
what happened?
yeah, and it was very uncomfortable.
Oh,
But here it is 25 years later, and I still remember it.
yeah.
And
And this
she
was
told
from
me
the woman who you asked this woman to give you the feedback?
I
Okay.
did.
Wow.
She gave me the feedback. I was following up, obviously, after I lost. I didn't realize yet I had lost, but I lost.
Okay. Okay.
And I assumed I lost on price. She said, "Nope, you were actually the least expensive, but you were also the least prepared."
Wow.
And she said something that kind of that stuck with me, right? And I said, okay, I need to ask a follow up here. And I said, hey, can I just get some feedback on how it went for you? As as a buyer. And she's like, "Are you sure you want to know these things?" And I said, "Yeah, please lay it on me." And yeah, it hurt. She was very honest, very
Oh,
transparent about, I didn't listen. You didn't listen. She said you made assumptions about our property, that you didn't ask questions. You didn't bring in the right engineering team to help you to further what we needed. I never felt like you were able to present what we were going to get out of it. And so it just was such a great turning point for me as a salesperson.
of
Um,
course.
and and thinking I was consultative, but I really was just assumptive.
Yes.
Um, and I
Mm.
cannot think of how many other times where maybe somebody gave me the opportunity and I had to fix it on the
Mhm.
operational side because I
Mhm.
made assumptions. And so
Mhm.
it was a great turning point for me in my young career
Absolutely.
to
Mhm.
learn, that I just want, when you're trying to wing it, or you're over your skis on a project, to get help.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
was just a really
Mhm.
great example. So
Oh, well, I would totally just applaud your willingness to hear the unthinkable at that moment, right? Like what a smash to any young person's ego, right? But
right.
good for you. I want listeners to take that in stride, not only hopefully to listen to things that, you can run with what you just heard Michael say not to do. So don't go in and assume. That's really the basics. I mean, that's the whole essence of the how to model, is
Right.
to not assume and to go and sit where your audience is sitting at when it comes to the solution that you bring, right? I'm going to throw something at you, Michael. Like, I don't know if you have
Please.
any way of finding this woman, but wouldn't she love to know how much she has helped your career? If you could locate her, or if you remember her name.
I I could tell you
um,
her name right now. I literally will never forget this woman's name, because it literally was like left a sting, right? But
well,
in the
whoever
best
that
possible
is,
way. Yeah,
thank you
yeah,
for helping
yeah,
Michael get better, right?
yeah.
What did you learn? Now I want to hear how you, because that can be really tough. And I can just say
Hmm.
from working with our clients, I'm really direct about my feedback if somebody, falls on their face. And I always give them a path to get better swiftly and make it mechanical. And we hit the emotional pieces that hurt, because that hurts. And so the danger is a person can stay down for too long. So
Right.
what happened to you after that? When, and did you get back up on your feet quickly, or did it take a while?
I I would say, that conversation stuck with me for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I literally had a conversation with my sales manager right afterwards and
Okay.
said, I think I need listening training, or
Yeah.
communication skills, or whatever. He said, "Great. I was just going to put you up for Dale Carnegie." And so
Oh,
it
perfect.
was perfect timing. It was like one of those, for me, I'm a person of faith. It was a God moment, right?
Yeah.
Where God
Oh,
was trying to say, "Hey, be open to
yeah.
putting your ego down and maybe
Yeah.
learning something." And
Oh, so good.
he signed me up for Dale Carnegie. And between that and some other training that I did, it changed the way I approached the
That's
entire
so
sales
wonderful.
process. Yeah.
I love
So
that. Yeah. Well, good for you. And now, just to put a tie a bow on this storyline, giving and receiving feedback. Like, what did you
mhm.
take about that when you have to give feedback to your team members, or anyone? How has that affected your ability to and style for giving and receiving, or for giving feedback, I should say, when it needs to be constructive?
Yeah. So I think it's different when I'm leading, when the folks we have a direct relationship where I'm leading them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's very different. Today, I have the benefit of having both direct reports and colleagues that I work with on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is I get to engage them in different ways, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe with a direct report, I have to be more directed to, uh, but still more along the lines of coaching for greatness, coming
Yeah,
from a place of,
relational. Mm-hmm.
this is going to make you
Mm-hmm.
better.
Right.
And what I'm about to share with you it will be good.
Mm-hmm.
You may not like what you hear, but at the end of the day, this is my goal, is to make you the best that you can be.
Yes.
Um, I think when you're working with colleagues that you have to give feedback on an account. So in running national global accounts, as I do, I interface with a lot of
Mhm.
people touching the account in different places,
Mhm. Mhm.
sometimes globally. And
Mhm.
so it's always a balancing act to being mindful of cultural norms and changes in the way maybe I
Yes.
have to share some information.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I have a responsibility to the client to make sure that
Yes.
things get done correctly. And
Right.
so sometimes it's, I think it's just being a little softer. Sometimes the way
Yeah.
we approach feedback,
Yep.
especially
Yep.
when it's negative, but also sharing
Yep.
praise publicly is
Yes.
huge for me. I love
Oh,
praising people in public, and maybe
yes.
and when I'm coaching, I try to take someone aside. I don't ever coach. Uh, that's definitely a leadership style I've experienced over the years of negative feedback in a public way.
Yeah.
I
Oh
just
my
don't
gosh.
think that really gets people
Never.
motivated,
Nope.
and
They're quite the
they tend
opposite.
to shut down, right? And so,
Yeah.
so I think that's an opportunity to say, hey, listen, the way you dealt with that, and I'll give you a great example. Even,
Yeah.
some of the younger people that I work with,
Mhm.
um, our CEO will give very directed feedback on our quarterly
Mhm.
business reviews,
Mhm.
and um, oftentimes he's trying to get the most he can out of those
Mhm.
individuals.
Sure.
Um, I think at times when you're younger, you take that and it hurt feelings,
Yeah.
and
Personally.
it may
Sure.
not be received the way I think it was intended, which was to
Right.
challenge that individual maybe to think a little differently. And
Sure.
so, sometimes I'll pull one of those regional managers off to the side and say, "Hey, Jimmy's just trying to get your attention, and
Yep.
he's going to you because." You as when you're looking at a horse race, you go to the horses that can perform.
Oh, I like it.
And so
Good. That's
you got to
great.
go with some level of acknowledgement, but it's true. I
Yeah.
do think the
Yeah.
reason it works is because it's authentic. It's not,
Right.
if you're full of hooey, people won't believe it.
Right.
But
And they wanna
there's
invest
truth
in
to it.
you. Mhm. If people you
That's
want to
right.
invest in your lead horses, and so when you're getting that kind of feedback, take it and run with it, and remember that that's belief in you that they have instilled, or that they have in you and in your capabilities, and they want you to keep running and leading the pack, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's really interesting, and I lost one of the thoughts I had, but I've got another one, so we're gonna go with that one.
I like it. That's good.
With regard to the global, sort of audiences you work with and your role right now, Michael, as you've kind of, made, you've had so many years of experience and you're now working at new levels and with new audiences. What do you love about your work? Like, what charges
Mm.
you up about the industry or your role or both? Like, what makes you love this work?
It's a great question. I think over 30 years, I've seen, especially commercially,
Mhm.
the risks continue to evolve. Unfortunately, we just got another piece of bad news where the
Mhm.
president was attacked in a hotel,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or not quite, but weapons
Almost.
were garnished, and
Mhm.
people are running through a checkpoint. This individual, right? So
Mhm.
not to talk about a negative, but in my industry, that's a failure, right?
Yeah.
The
Right.
failure of controls that led to someone getting weapons in a hotel in the first place, and then
Right.
getting through a checkpoint that should have not had one checkpoint. It should have had probably multiple. So
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest thing that inspires me is protecting others,
Ooh, okay.
people and spaces.
Mhm.
So it's not just, you think about all of the risk points you're facing from getting
Mhm.
into the car, going down the highway,
Mhm.
going to a Starbucks before you go to the office. These are
Mhm.
all points of risk.
Mhm. Red
And,
lights.
yeah, right. And so you see people um, totally checked out on their phones with earbuds on, walking down the street,
Mhm.
looking at their phone. I mean, the amount of risk, and so I think we take some things for granted in our country that
Mhm.
that's a safe thing to do. It's not.
Mhm. Right.
And so so it could be little moments like that. But Cindy, I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the years is commercially being involved in protecting others
Yeah.
in those commercial and government spaces,
Right.
uh, and just securing perimeters and documenting interiors. So in a
Cool.
healthcare setting, it could be as simply as having software or solutions that detect issues and
Yep.
weapons from getting in to, if someone's being assaulted, you're getting staff to
Mm-hmm.
mitigate that problem immediately. So those are just some of the things that when I think about over the years have made the biggest difference for me,
Yeah.
in providing those types of solutions that make a difference. I really enjoyed that.
Yes, and I heard, impact as a big piece is
Yeah.
my word for it, because when you're working at the scale that you're working at and you have accounts that, cover the globe or certain segments, you get to have that level of impact, to protect, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people because of what you bring to market in this day and age,
That's
and
right.
so that's gotta feel good, right? And you're not
It
just
does.
protecting one person, but you've got coverage and you've got blanket coverage for that. So, yeah, that's fantastic. Well, before we kind of wrap up and get to our last couple questions, what is happening in your world when it comes to the advent of AI, and how is that affecting
Mm.
business? Is it affecting business? What's your personal, what are you seeing on the ground, so to speak, with your teams and industry?
That's a great question. It is a daily conversation. For the last 10 years, I've been in software and hardware for
Mm-hmm.
the security space. So dedicated to the security space,
Cool.
um, AI has been in the forefront for us for a long time. Whether it's
Okay.
object recognition in an airport
Yeah.
to a hospital with weapons or aggression detection or any of
Mm-hmm.
those types of things. So we've had analytics and AI, if you will, machine
Mm-hmm.
learning
Sure.
for many, many years. And I
Okay.
was in the machine learning analytics space for the last couple of years before I was doing this.
Okay.
Um, what's evolved, I think, especially with large language models and AI data center growth, it's putting a lot of pressure on other organizations being able to afford technology today. That's a
Oh,
real thing.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so
Interesting.
as the data centers have grown substantially, and I
Mhm.
think the spend I just heard across the big four this year is going to be $630 billion.
I mean,
Um, it's
unbelievable.
it's it's growth that no industry I've seen. In my 30 years of doing this, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we think 50 million of that spend is going to be on servers and workstations, those are the same servers and workstations that we need for hospitals and universities and
Yeah.
K through 12, um,
Gosh.
and so that's been very impactful. And so it's putting a
Yeah.
lot of pressure on those
Mm.
same organizations to be able to afford the same security upgrades that they
Mhm.
would have may spent money on securing their perimeters, and
Mhm.
unfortunately they're just not able to do it
Yeah.
because that same server, those workstations, those chips are all going to data centers right now, and
Right.
so that's a challenge, something
So,
we're
Michael,
dealing with.
I'm curious, and does that does that expand your market long term? Does it change how you might price and package? I think that's really interesting that it really changes the landscape for you in a pretty marked way. So, when you
It
do
does.
projecting and looking ahead, what kinds of things are you now thinking about that you can share with us here?
Yeah, I'll certainly share some things that our company posture-wise has done, and that is we're releasing a new solution line that's going to align with where customers really are.
Hmm.
So where we might have done, as an example, a Dell or a Lenovo or HP system, now we're going to build our own. We're building our
Oh,
own to
okay.
make it more cost effective for
Okay.
those same universities, those hospital systems, those
Mhm,
schools, those commercial properties that aren't going to get those, we'll call it the Dell Enterprise system. Maybe they
mhm,
don't need it. And so
mhm.
we're
It's too
finding
big.
there's a
Mhm.
huge opportunity for
Interesting.
satisfying a market that's not going
Yeah.
to spend crazy amounts of money on
Mhm.
a server that works well, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
as long as it's supported, as long as it has a strong warranty, these we can be a little bit more agnostic about what it
Yeah.
is.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so that's been something we've done to kind of modify the market. The other thing is I've had to stay very close to the corporate teams
Mhm,
on their strategic sourcing direction.
mhm.
And this is something, talk about a monumental shift, Cindy. Whereas when we're a Dell system builder,
Mm-hmm.
first
Okay.
first and foremost,
Okay.
where we used to maybe at most wait 6 weeks to get our chassis and our hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Now those lead times are much more extended. So we're having to be much more prescriptive in the way that we're doing our
Mm-hmm.
demand plans.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay.
and we're even seeing quote cycles being in the 7 to 14 day range where they're requoting it again.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Our suppliers, and so it's just getting very challenging, I think, for our
Mm-hmm.
customers and their end users. So we're having to really adapt to this market very quickly
Yep.
by getting them information and putting together demand plans that we wouldn't have had to do before and at that level.
Right,
So
right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it brings, just use the lights analogy, lots of new red lights coming in that are
correct.
risky, and then having to find the right roads and pathways toward at least yellow and hopefully green light pathways that are going to be solutions for, at when markets change that fast and things are so different, you have to pivot as quickly as possible with the
That's right.
highest likelihood of success that you can summon up. So you do these beta test programs, or, for 90 days, we're going to try this and then we're going to see what happens. And that being agile is really important when markets are changing as fast as they are and technology is growing as fast as it is. And you're trying to protect people's lives,
That's right.
frankly. Right.
Yeah, and
So,
we're seeing a stronger push to the cloud. So I
yep,
think
sure.
it's driving some of the markets to the cloud faster than they would
Hmm.
have historically done so.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so it's just having you know a multitude of different pathways to
Yeah.
helping them solve their problems
Yeah.
given
Love it.
the market.
Love it. Well, our last question's more along the heart-centered parts of things in terms of, maybe a piece of advice you might give to a listener who's embarking upon a new sales journey or an early career. You and I both have kids who are entering the job market in the next
Hmm.
5 to 10 years. It's hard to believe we are in life where we are already.
It is
But
wild.
here we
Yes.
are. Yeah,
Yes.
what do you say to the folks who are, trying to get a job and looking for the next leg up? Like, what are some things that you would share for advice for listeners who are just getting going?
I'm gonna call one out. Actually, I had a mentor when I was graduating high school. If you remember Sarah Mass, her
I
father.
totally remember Sarah Mass.
Yeah, so her father took me under his wing and
Oh,
really helped me in getting into my first a first role in a company when I was trying to find my way. And there've been so many others, but I would say find a mentor
yeah.
and just try to
Mm,
see what there are folks out there that absolutely love to mentor the
mm-hmm,
new talent that is coming in, especially
mm-hmm,
with the work ethic.
mm-hmm,
So, be willing to do the extra and get people's attention.
mm-hmm.
Go above and beyond.
Yeah,
It sounds so cliche, but
yeah. It's true though.
if you do the minimum, people will see you as that person, that's going to do enough not to get fired.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and versus doing, just continually looking for innovative ways to differentiate your company, yourself,
mm-hmm,
your brand, your territory. If you're looking to be in sales, and whether it's sales or technical or
mm-hmm,
a technical career, it doesn't matter. It's the willingness to put in the extra work
mm-hmm.
to be that that thought leader or the wealth
Yeah.
of knowledge
Mm-hmm,
locally. I
mm-hmm.
think makes a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. And you're reminding me of a high school speech I heard locally here in Colorado, where the key word that the principal shared with the newly inducted National Honors Society class, he said he talked about initiative, initiative, take initiative, and that is your
Yes, so good.
that's your path toward standing out and be bold, but not too bold, and be a good question asker. All those things are wrapped up in some of the things that you shared. So I love it. Thanks,
Yeah,
Michael. This was such a great conversation, as I
absolutely.
knew it would be. This was really fun. Look forward to having you on again and finding out where you head next for as the market shifts and grows. So it was a pleasure to
Perfect.
have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share and comment and just share the love from the Red Light, Green Light podcast. We will be back again next week with another fantastic leader to share his or her story about storytelling in business, whether it's science, tech, pharma, finance, or innovation. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, get out there, find an audience that you need to move from the red light of risk to the green light of go. Get out there and nail it. Bye bye, everybody.